just taking you all in. And also letting you know that without going into many details, we've had another of our young, one of our Sangha members, another young son who's passed unexpectedly. So just hold your heart open for a mother who's lost a son. It seems to be something we have a little too much of these days. So, yeah, more will be coming. So let's now sit together. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. I want to encourage you all again, if you're not familiar with the verses that we sometimes use, and you don't have them in front of you, attempt to follow my voice, since it's the only one you're hearing, as best you can. You can stumble along and make lots of mistakes because no one can hear you. But this is the way we practice always, really. We follow someone or something as best we can, wholeheartedly, making our mistakes. And slowly it becomes part of our embodied reality in our life. And the words over time will have deep meaning and keep unfolding for you. I would assure you, at least it has for me and for many. So please just watch and listen and try to follow along, and it will begin to form itself in you. And just like all the practice does. You know, if you've been with us the last few weeks, that I've just recently become kind of interested in the ancient form of Japanese poetry, the tanka. And beginning a few weeks ago, you know, I used the small piece that Bonnie Trudell had brought to us about ice and rock, and then following that, the raindrops at midnight. And you know, I do use a lot of poetry and imagery, because I think poetry, you know, offers a voice and attempts to utilize language for what is beyond words and can't really be spoken so easily with the human voice. In other words, good poetry can be what I might call, from my position, a Zen voice, which invites and encourages us, and it inspires us and maybe challenges us to walk through what we might call the gateless gate in Zen, or along the groundless path into the embodied, inconceivable life that we're living. But here I go, using poetic analogies to point the way. This is how we, once again, kind of stumble along and find our way, if using language and using our body to express it by voicing it. And I brought another today, which Judy Myers had let me know about. It's written over 1,000 years ago by Izumi Shikibu, which a woman who's considered by many to be one of the greatest poets of the Heian period in Japan, and possibly the greatest master of the tanka form. Is a great woman and a great poet. The tanka form preceded haiku, actually. It literally means short poem or short song, and it's classically was a free verse. It had 31 syllables, and Japanese poets would write it in one unbroken line. When I was at Rinso-in, Suzuki Roshi's temple in Japan, practicing, I laughingly say we were in the new temple because the old one had burned down and this one was built, I think, in 1490. That was the new one. And as you go up to the Kaisandos, it goes up the hill through this beautiful wooden hallway. And when you would walk down, you would see on the rafters these big planks of wood. And I asked Suzuki Roshi's son, what they were. And he said they were records of poetry meetings. And you would see in Japanese script these long 31 syllable poems written. And then the next person would come and write one in response. And it was this living record of a moment of practice together. They were quite beautiful. A lot of the contemporary Japanese poets will write these tankas in 3 lines. And usually when it's spoken in English or written in English, they utilize 5 lines. I think in American poetry they're called, well, it's a foreign word, shinkwan, 5 lines. Here's the poem by Izumi Shikibu. And this is a translation by the wonderful poet Jane Hirshfield, who I'm sure many of you might have seen. I can link her speaking in just a 4-minute reflection about this poem and about her translation of it and how it changed her life. I can link that when we post this video. Jane Hirshfield practiced at Tassajara. In her memorial to Blanche Hartman when she died, my teacher, she said that Blanche and her husband Lou were her spiritual godparents. Here's the poem. Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof planks of this ruined house. Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof planks of this ruined house. It's one of those masterful pieces in which there's so much packed into a short 5 lines. And rather than, this isn't about poetry analysis, but about how it calls forward our practice, because I think the poet is, and in Jane Hirshfield's translation, they're speaking of aliveness, full human aliveness, which is what our practice is about. But this full human aliveness is only possible when we are permeated, we allow ourselves to be permeated by life's difficulties. That doesn't mean overwhelmed, but those between the roof planks of this ruined house, moonlight comes, even though the wind is blowing terribly. And we sometimes act or feel or think that if we could truly enjoy our life, if we could just be protected from it, if everything was just totally safe and good and right. But this doesn't make any sense, because being protected from all of our so-called difficulties or problems will also, of course, blunt ordinary care and kindness, joy, and even love as we struggle to buffer ourselves against pain and loss and grief and fear. And of course, these difficult things are things we don't want, but many of us are likely to arrive in practice, like arrive here even today, to help calm the winds, the strong winds that we feel, and to mend, or hopefully we think we're going to mend the leaks in what seems to be like our ruined house, ourself. And somehow we know this, of course, somewhere, but it's hard to admit it, and even harder to actually live it. And so at the end of her little reflection on this poem, I love Jane Hirshfield says, "May your house be a little ruined, and your roof a little leaky. Not only will we be more permeable to life, but what is unborn or unlived in us can be released as well. Something can permeate or penetrate and reach us, but also something can be released. And in terms of that release, here's an even more fierce reflection, I apologize, on this powerful practice of shaking up our house and finding what's there. This is from the Native American writer and environmentalist Linda Hogan. Some of you may know. Um, I'm going to read just a very brief few sentences here from something she wrote called Seed. She says, there are so many beginnings. In Japan, I recall, there were wildflowers that grew in the far, cool regions of the mountains. And the bricks of Hiroshima, the buildings down below, were made from clay from those mountains. And so the walls of houses and shops held the dormant trumpet flower seeds. But after one group of humans killed another with the explosive power of life's smallest element split wide apart, the mountain flowers began to grow. Out of destruction and bomb heat and the falling of walls, the seeds opened up and grew. What a horrible beauty. The world going its own way, growing without us. But perhaps this too speaks of survival, of hope beyond our time. I know it's a more fierce image, but it's not any more fierce than sometimes what it feels like. You know, we generally come to practice either because we're either inspired by something that calls us, or more than likely we're suffering in ways in which we feel like we don't have any other option. I know in my own case, it felt like the last ditch effort, not because my life was so terrible, but there are things that I couldn't quite settle. And that, of course, throughout my whole life, I'm still working to settle and to come to terms with and to understand and to deepen. The moon shining through the roof, even though the wind blows terribly, inspires this possibility. But the loss of ground sometimes feel like total destruction, like the loss of a child, can release some potential which maybe might not come in any other way. That doesn't mean it's a good thing. It means it's a possible thing. Hogan says, growing without us. She talks about survival, hope beyond our time. What grows beyond the self-centered dream and aside from our self-referenced ideas? You know, what survives the heat and falling apart that deep practice actually ushers us into? What does hope look like if it's not just self-reference, if it's not just hope for me, about me? And all this can sound powerful, but it also can stay really abstract if it's pointing to something profoundly transformational, which I have confidence in, but if it doesn't touch the heart of practice. And so I've invited my good friend and teacher Trudy Johnson to join me. I've asked her to raise her hand. I'm raising her hand. To share some of what she's written and experienced just in the last weeks. Because I think she shared it with me, it brings these powerful potentials and polarities to the heart of the matter. And I'll let her speak about whatever she'd like in this, and we'll carry forward.
Mm, thank you. Um, uh, just a short I listened to the Jane Hirshfield piece, and the wind was blowing pretty
Hmm.
strong. But the invitation and the connection felt like light. So just even that little moment of hearing that poem and her describing it was so enlivening. And the wind blows.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'd written to Flint with a poem that I'd written after a meeting, and in the email I described a practice that I'd done with a group of women friends, which some of you may know, I'm sure, which is standing in a circle and having like about 5 or 6 or 7 skeins of wool, and you loop them round your waist if you've got one of the balls of wool, and then you throw it to someone in the group, and they loop it round their waist, making sure not to make it so tight that you can't get out of it. So you don't want to be trapped in it. And then they throw it to someone else, and these balls of wool just cross and crisscross and connect, and in the end you end up with the invisible made visible, the connection between us. And it's so powerful, it's so evocative to do it as a just that, all these connections that we have, and you can kind of lean back and let the web take some pressure, and you can move and sway, and it's a deliciously beautiful practice. um yeah, making the invisible visible. And I wrote about that in my email to Flint, and then I also wrote about that when I saw that Jessica had become head student and we were being invited to meet, I had such a strong impulse. I was like, oh, I'm on it. I'm going. And I haven't met really Jessica. I'd just seen her face, and felt drawn, just felt really, really drawn. Um, and so I typed in my name and got my meeting set up, and met with her, and it was so it felt like we met. Like, here's two people sitting on different sides of a vast body of water, who've never been in each other's physical presence, and there was something in us that met, that felt so kind of shared. And I was exploring what I always explore, which is I studied in a meditation, an ashram, many years ago, and we had a phrase which we called, which was bogey yogis. Like where you wear all the gear and you have your bindi and you do it, but really, really. Um, and I carry a kind of constant fear and sort of anxiety about, um, yeah, my practice, and it's not even good enough. It's something else. It's like something. And I was exploring that and Jessica was being really generous in her response to me. And we recalled the piece that Flint had read in the inquiry that week, which was about the rain penetrating not just the moss but the stone. And I live near a lot of limestone paving, and an area in Derbyshire, and called it's limestone. And limestone is porous and won't hold water. And as we were talking, I just had this really powerful sort of sense of the Dharma, of practice, um, seeping through, kind of right inside, and the outside still looking exactly like it looks. It's kind of like nothing looks like there's, yeah, it doesn't look different. But underneath these limestone paving, when the water gets far enough and hits bedrock, it starts to collect, and it makes rivers, and it makes galleries and grottos, and it's just an extraordinary landscape formed through drops, just drops of water. Um, and something in me felt kind of really heartened by that. Maybe if I just if I just keep sitting under the dripping water long enough, something something is happening that's kind of nothing to do with me. And that was the other kind of piece, was just feeling like I think this is probably just nothing to do with me. I just have to kind of keep sitting under the drops of wisdom and love and connection and who knows what's happening. Um, so as these things kind of move in me, I wrote a poem. So I wrote a poem for Jessica because that was such a heartfelt, touching connection. So the poem is called "We Can Let It Be Mysterious," because it is. Talking with a new friend, we were exploring whether there was some endless, unknown, comparative other that I couldn't be. She offered some remembered lines from a poem, water penetrating not just moss, but rock as well, and the invisible rivers of the limestone dales deep below the green and slabby stone-strewn landscape came to my mind. Dripping water scouring bedrock into winding, twisting riverbeds, echoing cathedral spaces and fantastical pillars. Can I allow myself to be scoured by love, by connection, by intimacy, to let go of seeming, to be big enough to hold a subterranean river flowing deep with life, to be big enough to hold a subterranean river flowing deep with life, a mysterious, hidden landscape, for we can let it be mysterious, because it is. To trust that so much more is unfolding and flowing than my small self can ever know. To trust that so much more is unfolding and flowing than my small self can ever know. For Jessica.
Thank you, Trudy.
Hmm.
Please just stay here uh, with me.
Hmm.
You can understand now, all of you who have heard this, why I would ask her to come forward. Because our practice invites us to trust something that maybe it's hard to trust, as Trudy said, to offer ourselves to, this unfolding that isn't really about ourselves, to find this flowing and this knowing of the mysterious hidden landscape, to trust that so much more is unfolding and flowing than myself, small self, can ever know. As I was looking at a couple of things after Trudy and I spoke and I had read the poem, and I was also thinking about the piece that I read from Linda Hogan, which is so fierce and includes that reference to an atomic bomb. I came across another um, piece by her, which I'm only going to read a few lines from, but it reminded me, Trudy, of your walking in Derbyshire. And curiously, the hill country of central Texas around Austin is all limestone, and it's exactly the same thing. We live on the Edwards Aquifer, huge underground river there. But here's just a few more words from Linda Hogan, lest you think she's all difficulty. She said, "Sometimes I hear it talking. Sometimes I hear it talking. The light of the sunflower was one language, but there are others more audible. Once in the redwood forest, I heard a beat, something like a drum or a heart coming from the ground, and trees and wind, that underground current. That underground current stirred a kind of knowing inside me, a kinship and longing, a dream barely remembered that disappeared back to the body. I'm walking. Now I'm listening in a deeper way. Suddenly, all my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say. Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands. Which is exactly what your poem and your one connection with Jessica certainly inspired. So this, calls our practice questions. What's beginning in you now? What's opening? Uh, what's ruined? What is it? What does our practice make possible? This allowing myself to be scoured. Just trust that so much more is unfolding. What's moving in you right now as a result of what we've spoken of? And please raise your hand and come forward. Each of us might have something to say. You can't let Trudy do all of the heavy lifting today. You don't, there she comes. Now she's unmuted. What did we miss? What you said? Say that again.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to thank Trudy. I wanted to meet you. That's why I raised my hand. um, Such a lovely expression of your experience, and it brought me to tears. It's just so wonderful that you're able to share that in such a public way. Um, and I just wanted to say thank you. So it means so much to me. And I was at the intensive where Jessica, I don't even know, was made head student. Is that the correct terminology?
Intern as head student, and Trudy has done this as well. Trudy was head student in England.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, but I have also been thinking, I'm rather new to Appamada, but I have been thinking of asking for tea. And Jessica is the one that I would absolutely want to do that with. So it inspires me as well that you had such a wonderful experience when you clicked that button and made it happen. So I intend to follow in your footsteps. So
Oh,
thank
please
you.
do. It's such uh, allowing ourselves to connect despite our fear and anxiety, and I have, seriously sweaty palms and all of that, and and I feel held by love, and it's like that's what allows us to come forward. So please meet and enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for hitting your button, Sheila, so you would come forward.
Yeah.
And I would just remind everyone too that Jessica is sharing the seed with Nate. They're doing a shared head student offering, which is wonderful. It's much like Peg and I have walked through this time at Appamada together. Certainly, Trudy and Josh have done that in the north of England, and so please reach out to both of them because I know they would welcome your invitation. Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Hi, Trudy and Flint. Thank you for this beautiful. I love poetry, so I love hearing the short, potent ones. Really amazing. Few things that came to my heart as you were speaking. I love the word leaking because instead of shining through, what it brought up in me was this, like, in spite of myself, the moonlight comes in anyway. It's like this really interesting use of language, the leaking. It was just beautiful to, it just touched me in a particular way. So I feel like this, you know, I'm recovering from this surgery, and it's been such a big, I'm recovering from a craniotomy, those of you who don't know that. And it's been this total reorientation. It's a my vestibular nerve center was disturbed. So it's like this really interesting way of reorienting to everything. And I've had to really dial into this sense of how can I find joy and contentment in this extreme vulnerability. This is a long haul recovery. This is like a year of recovery. And so I'm like, I can't wait a year to be joyful. I'm going to have to figure out how to like work with this. So it's just that leaking aspect just touched me within that context. I also really appreciated this sense of, I used to think it was really annoying when I was grieving the loss of someone or something, that the world goes on. I used to find that really unnerving. And so, Flint, when you were talking about that as hope, that life goes on, because life will go on and on and on, and that we can have an imprint, that we can leave something. And it reminded me of this birthday, this significant birthday when I outlived my mom in age. I was turning 45, and I went to Woodstock, New York. So I was born in New York. And I went to Woodstock, New York, and took a hike the day of my birthday. And I came upon this house that it was this huge structure. And trees were growing up inside of it, and vines, and there were just crumbling. I mean, it looked like it was more than a house. It might have been a hotel at some point or something. And it was just this extraordinary structure left behind with all of this growth, all of these amazing trees and everything growing up into it. And I thought, you know, we're going to be long gone, and life is going to move into this, whatever we choose to decide what we leave behind. So I just wanted to share those two thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, that word leaking really did capture me too. It stood out. It's very different than shining.
Mm-hmm.
And it uses that water image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both.
Does your vestibular thing, did it make you dizzy?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I have no vestibular nerve on the right side.
Oh, Trudy.
I have labyrinthitis. I know a lot about dizziness and finding a still place when it's actually not there.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to know that there's someone walking with me on that journey.
Wobbling with you.
Yes. It is it's a humbling experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and for her, I know that she had had that kind of experience, which I like your description, to find a still place when there isn't one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, my own beloved partner Aaron had a craniotomy because he had a tumor. So I understand what a recovery from that is like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart.
No, it's a slow leaking difficulty, blessing, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you're living in this, there is this unknown that's in your every moment. Because neurology, it's a science, but being a neurologist, I think, is probably the best gig ever, because you don't have to have any guarantees, no outcomes, no determining kind of how you'll end up. But
well, you're poking around in a mysterious place.
Yes, it's really frustrating, and also really, really expansive at the same time. So I try to stay on the side of expansive.
Would you, just because our metaphors are carrying forward, because I read the piece by Hogan about the incinerated home, something being released, and you shared in the intensive, since the Colorado fires, you live in Colorado, that there was a particular thing remaining in one of your friends' homes. Could you just tell that story?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I have a friend who lives in Louisville and Colorado, and there was a fire that they think started because some wires came down during a storm. There were hurricane force winds that day, and it just took out subdivisions of homes within a matter of hours. She was in Puerto Rico, and she lost her home, her car, her cat, and it all that was left standing of her home was a Kuan Yin statue. And do you have the photo, Flint? Yeah. So can I take the liberty of reading a poem that I wrote about this?
Sure. And while you're looking, when you look around, everything, that's a pickup truck, is
Yeah,
incinerated. And she
yeah,
sits in ease,
yeah,
royal ease.
yeah.
Please, Liz, go ahead.
Okay, so this is what I wrote about it. When she first told us, she listed out the things most dear: 2 decades of soul collage, handmade mosaics in every window, process painting, gardening, children's art and birth books, grandparents' legacy, dad's meditation shawl, her wedding ring, her son's clay turtle, rainbow weaving and sunflower and self-portrait, her other son's family newsletters and battle scenes and mazes, decades of pictures saved on a laptop, hammock, trampoline, the porch her son built, their cars, climbing, camping, skiing, and biking equipment. All of this that made up not merely a home, but a self-proclaimed sacred space, a part of her, like bones. Then she said, Swaha, all is gone. I have been holding this word, Swaha, ever since. Swaha, so be it, by the fierce power of Agni, the fire. Swaha, okay, I surrender. I surrender now, and now, and now. Swaha, it is easy to curl into a ball and let the inertia of grief envelop you. It is the greatest courage to let the inertia be alchemized into the gratitude that gets you up and open to all that is being revealed to you. Swaha, I am connected now to all of the griefs of the world for all those who have lost everything. Swaha, I am not my possessions. I am something else entirely. Swaha, when all has dropped away, the steady gaze and comfort of compassion remains. It lives in our blood, behind our eyes. It helps us to remember the power of the invisible. Swaha, to raise your hands to the sky and say thank you. Thank you for all that remains, for all that is not lost, that has not gone.
It's a little bell for that one.
Thank you for letting me read it.
Thank you. It's these things are the balls of yarn we're throwing and wrapping ourselves in.
Yes.
All of us. May your recovery continue well, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Penelope next.
Thank you, everyone who has done these beautiful, beautiful reflections today. It means so much because, like you all have all said, we're in this together. So this is such support. But what I wanted to say pertinently now is that in relation to what Flint was saying about Hiroshima and the clay and the flowers blooming, and that it was a terrible yet beautiful image. As I was driving back home this morning from an appointment, I live in an urban area downtown, and so I saw on the main road called Main Avenue, going home, there was a man who was like lying halfway into like he was either passed out or dead or something, but he was in the lane, like he was like falling over the curbing, and no, everybody was just going along, and the cars all driving by. And so I thought, I can't believe like if a bus would have come along, he would have been run over, or any kind of a thing like that. So luckily there was a driveway right down that, and I pulled in and I called 911, and I told them what happened, and they said, well, is he the man in the white shirt with the tan pants? Yes. And I said, yes. And they said, are you going to stay? And the police are coming, and the EMS and all that. And I said, yes, I'm going to stay until they come. So I walked over, and a man had just walked past. He had his headphones on. And I said, did you see the man? And he's like, whatever, and kept walking on. And so the EMS came and said, hey, guy, get up. And he was alive, and they got him up, and I guess he was passed out from drugs or something. So I made sure that, he was okay. And then I got back in my car, and I looked around, and the EMS had gone, and the man was just walking along. And it was such a horrible thing, because you thought, it's not like they took him away somewhere safe, in other words, they realized that he was, I guess, on some kind of substances or whatever, passed out. And so I was crying by this point, because I just felt like in other words, you can't save the world. So my daughter called right at that moment, and I was talking to her as I continued driving home, so upset. And anyway, the next image was I was at the crosswalk, at the light, and a man came walking across the street acting like a horse, how you jog along like that. And he had his little 2-year-old son on his shoulders. And, so they were both in complete joy. And I was just blown away that, it was that whole thing, like, this was so terrible, yet this other image was so beautiful of the new life. And it's like you're saying, it's always seeping through, and it's a circle. But I don't know, I just had to show that it was just so profound. Huge examples right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so ones that impacted you, you noticed. What you're telling us, not to make this too simplistic, is the difference between the result of your practice and maybe not being so attentive. I'm not judging the other people. I'm just saying something said, I want to pay attention. I want to keep my heart open. I want to do what I can do. And I want to be open to the difficulties, the ruined house, the roof breaking, and the joy that can come through at the same time. So your practice makes a difference, Penelope.
Yes.
And you have a good reminder over your left shoulder back there on the wall.
That's true. That's Athena.
Oh?
That's her name.
Oh. The skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
And I turned to, Rosemarie, wait, come on in. I was just turning to gallery view for a minute to look at everyone.
Hi, I'm not really sick. I'm just feeling a little lightheaded, but it does kind of relate. What's that?
I said, of course you are. That seems to be the theme today.
I know. Well, the image of the light leaking through the fierce wind. I was thinking of the pandemic and all of the pain and suffering, and how this beautiful garden of the global Appamata came out of that. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm one of the sprouting somethings that came out of it, because it got me starting to meditate, and then reaching out to Flint, and then coming to inquiry. That was my very first experience. And Trudy, your vulnerability with Jessica was so beautiful. And yeah, I find that these experiences, these connectings here, meetings with spiritual friends, sitting with folks, and then our little after zazen, after inquiry. They're so powerful, and there's a lot of rawness that comes out of it. And scouring, I think that was one of the images. Yeah, for sure. And there's so much beauty, I think, that comes out of all of the rawness, you know. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you so much. And everyone, all the beauty that was shared today. Incredible. Thank you.
One of the reasons, among many, that I thought the imagery that Trudy offered with the balls of yarn and the weaving is because, to me, it's a lovely embodied, physicalized way of expressing what Rosemarie, you were talking about. And by the way, you called yourself a new sprouting something. Well, you're a rose. Come on, Rose Marie. You know, you're red. This this web of connection, because classically, in more classical formats, there are teachers and students. I even do it this way, you know. And it's certain we have acknowledgement of teachers and spiritual friends who have some experience, and we call them head students. And there is respect and experience that does exist. And yet, what you see here today, what we're doing is a mutuality rather than a top-down, you give me a question, I'll give you the answer. And so, does that make sense, Trudy? I mean, I realize this inquiry is a different, it's taken a new shape through Appamada's way of teaching, which is relational, which is based on so much of what you teach in Hakomi and other things. So I'm just reflecting on the preciousness of that, which is very different than the guru model, certainly, that you referenced, but also a traditional classic spiritual teaching model.
I was just thinking, I hope she wouldn't mind me saying, but Chris Ulrich sent me a possible thing I could have attended, which was on deep listening, and she generously shared some of the pieces. And what came to mind for me was an old Sweet Honey in the Rock song about listen more often to people, to things than to beings. And it's, I don't know if you know it, it's the most gorgeous song about the ancestors singing in the wind, and I was just having that feeling of these little things that just, if we open ourselves to them, and we can be tender and vulnerable, and not know, but connect.
Yes, to not know but connect.
And that feels like, you know, as someone who's leaned very deeply into self-reliance over a very long period of time, it's come to me a little late that how connected I am. So it's not that I wasn't, but it's like a real, it's like something I really honor now.
You had to be scoured a bit.
Yes, scoured. And Robin's here, so.
I mean, I think we're about to run out of time, so
Oh,
Vicky, let's go for it.
We are.
So many wonderful things have been shared. And Trudy, I know that song exactly. I was singing it as you were remembering it, and I've heard them perform it several times long ago. But I have to say that my body is so in a state of anxiety because of what you began with, Flint, and the care that we have for one another, and perhaps the mom who has lost a son in his embodied form is not ready to, you know, be in public. but I want to extend such care.
Mhm.
And I think we both have just been holding that since we have a son, and we have known too many people who have lost their sons. And so I knew that if I avowed that, my body would settle down a little bit. And sometimes that's all.
Mhm.
That's all.
That's all that's necessary.
And also to just bring all of us to offering that family care.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely. And you know, because it was made public when Kim and Madison had lost her son, just a while back, um, just a few months ago. And this morning when we were texting, she said, and the other young man who was lost, his name Kalen, she said, I told Fred to make sure he, connects with Kalen.
I didn't know about Kim actually. I'll find out about that separately. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for mentioning it. And we'll know that name at least and hold them. Mhm.
And so can you say the name again? Caleb?
Kalen.
Kaylin.
Kaelin. Nice Irish name. Kalen.
Thank you.
And although we're right at the end of our time, I want to make sure we say hello to Wayne because he's had a rough go of it, and I just want to hear his voice a little bit, just for a second.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Nice
You're out
to
of the
see
hospital.
everyone. Yeah, I've been dealing with some fairly significant health problems. I wanted to say to Liz that I too have a vestibular disorder. I have an acoustic neuroma that crushed my right vestibular nerve. And that was in 2017. I spent a year being dizzy, but it got better and it continues to get better. And now I just have to deal with spatial balance. And Liz, I also live in Colorado, and my heart is broken for friends who have lost their homes in the fire, and I think of them almost daily. And the last word is I've had the good fortune of being backpacking camping at 12,000 feet, where the moonlight felt like water as it encompassed us all in a very beautiful way. I love that. I love the word leaking. I've been in that house, and so nice to see all of you, and good to see you, Flint. I'm on the mend, and I'll be seeing you all on at the inquiry.
Good. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see all of
As
you.
we prepare for our final voicing of the four practice principles, I'll also say that the mother of the young man who died is on the Western Slope, and he passed in Fort Collins, Wayne. So we have a strong Colorado contingent today here. So I'll if you want to mute Trudy just so we don't make a funny thing with the Zoom, but please chant with me. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Thank you, Trudy, so much for being at my side today and for all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Flint and Trudy, and thank you all so much for being here today. If you'd like to make a contribution or for Dana, please do go to the website at apamada.org/contribute. And there you'll find an opportunity to offer Dana to teachers such as Peg and Flint and the entrusted teachers, Josh, not Josh, sorry, because it's because Trudy's been on, you see. I've got Josh in my mind. To Laurie, Todd, and Joel, and for any other practice discussions, events, or anything else. And please do take a look at the calendar. You'll see lots of wonderful events that you can take part in there. Thank you all so much, everybody. And if you'd like to continue to meet and share, please do stay right where you are for a further 30 minutes, and we'll continue to share on the virtual porch as we call it. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.